brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that sends 5% of your monthly plan price to your favorite charity. No contracts, nationwide coverage, risk-free guarantee. Learn more at CharityMobile.com. The bishops are in a weird place at the moment. Francis and the Roman Curia are flexing their authority in all manner of things, most notably in the liturgy, by claiming power for Rome that flies in the face of the relationship the bishops have expected to have with Rome under this pontificate and in recent pontificates. What makes this all the more weird is that the Synod on Synodality preaches a message of listening and dialogue, making it sound like the voice of the bishops matters. The reality is that they only matter when they line up with the voices of select laity that have been chosen by Rome, and by Rome-aligned bishops to preach a specific message in the name of the Synod. That's to be expected. By even saying this, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I've made that point in countless videos at this point, but what is new is that the bishops are using AI software to write some of their synodal documents for them. This is an admission that came out of the Synod in Asia last week. From the daily roundup at Pillar Catholic from a few days ago, we get this story. Quote, "The Asian Synodal Continental Assembly in Bangkok, Thailand, ended Sunday following discussion of a draft final document that will be submitted to the Vatican ahead of October's Synod on Synodality. In what could be a first in the Catholic Church, the text was compiled with the help of artificial intelligence. After a period of silent prayer, Father Clarence Devadas, member of the discernment and drafting team, presented the updated draft response to the Continental document under discernment and review, reported Vatican News. This new draft was compiled with the use of both AI and HI, human intelligence," Father Devadas noted. In fact, the Asia Continental Assembly is the first of the continental assemblies to incorporate the use of digital technologies to gather the amendments and input from the participants. End quote. Some have likened AI to the diabolical. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it's just a fancy tool, though, that most of us just don't understand. It certainly has diabolical applications, but let's be real, almost every technological development in human history has had such applications as well. What I can say for certain is this. I miss the days when creative work was the subject of, to borrow a term from the late Father Cicada in the New Mass, when it was the work of human hands, instead of just inputting data into some fancy software and letting it do the work for you. And that's what the bishops in Asia are doing. Honestly, if it had come out that the bishops in the Americas and Europe were doing the same thing, I'd have completely believed you. I mean, have you seen how absurd some of the statements they've been making have been? Some of the things that have come out of the synodal meetings at the various continental phases in Europe and the Americas. But that actually leads to the main topic of the video today. The Synod on Synodality has already been a disaster for the Church. Bishop Athanasius Schneider recently gave an interview to LifeSite News where he describes how dangerous the Synod was and how everything about the Synod runs counter to the history of the Church. I guess we can add the use of AI software to the promulgation of church documents on the list of things that run counter to the history of the Church, but Schneider's point is something that needs to be taken pretty seriously. The faith is being diluted, or even replaced, by the Synod, and at the very least by making it appear as if the once concrete moral teachings of the faith were now subject to popular approval and revision at the whims of the public. That is a very dangerous thing in the life of the Church, and one that should not stand. Bishop Schneider is telling the truth about the Synod, and is doing so in such a manner that he will almost certainly never get promoted to anything other than being the assistant bishop like he is now. At least, not until we get a decent pope in Rome, if that ever happens. With that said, headline from LifeSite. Exclusive. Bishop Schneider says Synod on Synodality serves up spiritual poisons to the faithful. Bishop Schneider spoke to LifeSite News on the dangerous Synod on Synodality, warning about its promotion of concepts and a style of governance that runs contrary to the entire history of the Church. He's not wrong. Several Protestant groups have run themselves in a synodal way for decades or even a few centuries, and none of them have had good outcomes from the experience in recent years. The Catholic Church is hierarchical in nature, and whether a pope chooses to use his power and authority in a stronger manner is really up to his conscience and the dynamics of the Roman Curia, as well as to the reality of canon law. But What the church is not is democratic in nature, and synodality is just an attempt to use the guise of democratization to push a heretical program onto the church. That much should be clear to everyone involved. From their article, quote, Bishop Schneider warned how the current synod on synodality is a, quote, tool used to dilute ever more the clarity of the Catholic faith, as we are now observing, dribbling ever more confusion and doctrinal confusion into the life of the Church. It's a grave abuse of the institution of the synod, which the Church for 2,000 years understood, he stated. The Vatican has highlighted how the multi-year synod on synodality is about, quote, listening, even to the point of, quote, listening to non-Catholics or lapsed Catholics. But Bishop Schneider noted that a properly ordered synod has clear prerogatives. The synod is an instrument of the magisterium, but its first aim is to clarify doctrine without any ambiguity, without any doubt. The second task of a synod should be to, quote, reject the errors of time. Yet Schneider warned that the current actions of the synod are allowing poison, spiritual poisons, to spread. A true synod should also be concerned with, quote, disciplinary issues to give a, quote, remedy against abuses, he noted. Instead, he described the synod on synodality as resembling a, quote, parliament in a worldly manner, something which is, quote, contrary to the entire history of the Church and the entire method of God. It is worldly. It is not Christian even, end quote. That is a heck of a statement. I've always wondered what the bishops hope to learn about the faith from the same generations of people they've said in the recent past were the worst catechized in history. There's an incoherence to this whole thing if we take the concept of the synod at face value. But that's the thing. Why should we take it at face value? At face value, we are told that they're listening to the laity. The bishops across the Western world have all given us ample evidence that the concept of synodality and the synod itself have nothing to do with listening to the faithful, but rather they're using the faithful to push a heterodox program onto the whole church. That much is obvious given how eerily similar all the worldly requests the laity are making to the bishops across the West, including the normalization of sins that the church since the start has opposed, as well as on the topic of the ordination of women and focus on materialist political programs. It's all the same pretty much in every country in the West, to the point where it looks like this whole thing is being directed by some group within the bishops themselves, perhaps the St. Gallen group. Schneider denounces all of this by pointing out that the church seems to be saying that the people need to listen to each other instead of listening to Christ. The bishops may claim that the Spirit, whatever that is working through the synod, but in reality, it's the church listening to the world and debating whether to secularize the church's moral teachings. Let's not lie to ourselves. That's what is being debated right now in Germany, at the European continental phase, and that's some of the things that was debated at the North American one recently. Quote, expanding on this, Bishop Schneider pointed out the peculiarity of focusing the Catholic Church on listening instead of teaching. The entire humanity has to listen to Christ's voice, not each other, he stated. To listen to each other instead of Christ is against revelation, he added. And then, Christ did not say to all the apostles, go and listen to all the people, but go and teach and instruct them in what I have taught you. This is the message of the church, not to present herself, not to make parliamentary sessions and to listen to people, but to proclaim the truth with clarity and charity, of course. Such a mission of proclaiming the Catholic faith is a duty of the bishops, along with the Pope, noted Schneider. Also, it's an expression of love for those who do not know the clarity of faith, referencing the synod's concept of coming together to listen. Schneider suggested that such an action is a dilution of the Catholic faith and an irresponsibility and a gesture, even of non-charity, from the side of the Pope and the bishops. This is because people are in need of clarity, in need of structure, he stated. End quote. Christ established a structure. Yes, he established a visible church with a visible authoritative hierarchy and a visible head who is his vicar on earth. The bishops are afraid of the implications of this now for whatever reason, perhaps because the world demands that authority bow to every whim of the masses. I'm not sure why they're afraid of proclaiming the truth. Perhaps if they had proclaimed the unfiltered Catholic truth, none of this would be necessary, and the world might be in a better place than it is now. But that's not where we are at the moment, unfortunately. So, of course, I'm curious what you think about this. Is Bishop Schneider right? Is the application of AI in the synodal process not something to worry about? Or is it a sign of something diabolical? Does the synod represent a dilution of the faith? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help, as does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot, too. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.